There were a lot of questions going into the nomination hearing of Jared Isaacman to be President Trump's NASA administrator. On the surface, the question was on the nomination, and it's pretty clear he will be confirmed. But most of the questions were about where everyone was positioned in Trump's second term. Not just Mr. Isaacman, but the senators too, who have kept fairly quiet about NASA policy during the noisy transition and first few months of the new White House. Hey everyone, thanks for your time. We came out of the hearing with much more clarity on what the senators want to do than the soon-to-be administrator. We learned more about what the White House wants to do on Friday, April 11th, with evidence in several stories that the White House wants to cut one of NASA's other directorates in half, as has been rumored for weeks. At the end of the video, I'll run through a few news and notes from the week on Artemis work, Artemis II stacking, pictures of the Gateway Halo module being unboxed in the Phoenix area, and the Pegasus barge making an SLS ground support equipment pickup at the Kennedy Space Center. But the focus was on the nomination hearing and what the White House and Mr. Isaacman want to do with NASA. He was very guarded in his testimony, and maybe cutting NASA science in half symbolizes why. He was unwilling to say much, but he had the job before the hearing, so we'll have to see if he's willing to argue for those cuts next time he is in front of Congress, if they remain in the White House budget. Even as NASA continues to stack the Artemis II vehicle for launch, and with the flight crew in attendance at the confirmation hearing, we're still waiting to see whether the White House wants to cut that too. For Mr. Isaacman, his legacy is very likely to be evaluated starting now. Like other astronauts who became NASA administrators, they are remembered as administrators, and Mr. Isaacman's legacy begins again as a Trump man. Isaacman's nomination hearing was widely anticipated going back to right after the election in November, when Elon Musk got him the interview with then President-elect Trump. Last week, going into the hearing, here are the broad questions I had about the overall Artemis politics, so to speak. The hearing was really the first opportunity for the public to hear not only Mr. Isaacman as both a future and current representative of the White House, but also the first real chance to hear from these senators in the NASA Oversight Committee. There's a lot to go through, and even though the Artemis II flight crew was in attendance at the hearing, along with other astronauts, the setting isn't as important as the statements. So if we go through where things stand in terms of those questions after the hearing, here's what I saw and heard. First, which Artemis programs does the White House, that being Trump, Musk, and Isaacman, want to terminate? NASA's SLS rocket was the program cited the most, but all the government programs, which were started before the Artemis brand name was coined 6 years ago, have been in rumors about being cut. Coming out of the hearing, we still don't have any better idea. Senators like Chairman Ted Cruz of Texas made it much clearer where they stood, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. But even in accepting the assertion from senators questioning him, Mr. Isaacman said that he has reservations long term. That's as much as he would clarify. Looking at the second question, when will the White House announce their plans, the only clarity from Mr. Isaacman's testimony came from ruling out the hearing as a place for clarity. So it would seem that we will have to wait until the White House releases its budget request for fiscal year 2026, sometime in the next month or so. The hearing left the door open to pretty much anything in the FY 2026 PBR. Nothing is off the table. We haven't heard as much about a quote-unquote skinny budget in the past few weeks. That was overshadowed by tariffs, or maybe now that the Senate and House have passed a budget resolution with high-level numbers, we might see something ahead of the full release. Or maybe we're going to have to wait for the full release. The third question was how much is Congress opposed to terminating Artemis programs, and that was partially answered. The senators in the Oversight Committee, beginning with Senator Cruz, made it a lot clearer that they continue to support the existing Artemis programs. Senator Cruz framed his statements and some of his questions in this area in terms of the race that they see the U.S. in with China. The U.S. would be returning astronauts to the moon after a half-dozen lunar landings over a half-century ago. China would be landing taikonauts there for the first time. Here's a little bit of the statement he prefaced a few questions to Mr. Isaacman with. This seemed aimed not so much at the nominee as the audience viewing the hearing from outside the room, including the White House.
Likewise, the Artemis mission launched during President Trump's first term, is set to return American astronauts to the moon and establish a sustained human presence there. Joining us in the audience today, as we heard earlier this morning, are the 4 Artemis II astronauts: Reed Weissman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen. In the next year, they will fly to and orbit the moon, setting the course for Artemis III's return to the lunar surface in 2027. The Artemis missions and the entire Moon to Mars program, which have enjoyed consistent bipartisan support, serve as a stepping stone to landing American astronauts on Mars. In fact, this stepping stone approach is explicitly in the law as enacted by Congress. We must stay the course. An extreme shift in priorities at this stage would almost certainly mean a red moon, ceding ground to China for generations to come. I am hard-pressed to think of a more catastrophic mistake we could make in space than saying to communist China, the moon is yours, America will not lead.
The fourth question was whether Trump and Musk, and now Mr. Isaacman, still want to go to the moon. That was left in some doubt by Mr. Isaacman's testimony. He said that he agrees with the president that putting astronauts on Mars should be the agency's top goal, while also acknowledging that Congress's priority is first the moon, then Mars. If Mars first, or quote-unquote Mars and also moon, unquote, is better than moon first, then Mars, he didn't lay out arguments why, and maybe that's a sign that the White House isn't going to try to lobby Congress, at least not in public. In terms of takeaways, the obvious one from the hearing was that Isaacman was very guarded in his testimony, to a broad range and style of questions. One of the more demonstrative cases was with the questions by Democratic Senator Andy Kim of New Jersey, who gave Isaacman the opportunity to elaborate on the position in his opening statement that he will prioritize sending American astronauts to Mars, as Trump has said. For example, Senator Kim basically asked him what benefits going to Mars make it the higher priority for the country.
I guess, kind of as we've been talking about this, moon, Mars, 2 priorities, you were much more definitive about saying we need to get to Mars. So I guess I just want to ask you that same question. What are the scientific, economic, and national security priorities that you see more clearly when it comes to going to Mars right now than in terms of having a permanent presence on the moon?
Well, Senator, to be clear, I certainly hope in the future that we have lots of space stations, a full lunar outpost, a Mars outpost, and we're pushing even beyond that. I'm just saying we need to get back to the moon. We need to figure out why we need to be there, and I certainly hope there is a reason.
Why do we need to be at, what I'm trying to get a sense of, you seem much more definitive about saying we need to get to Mars and putting resources towards that effort. What are the specific economic, scientific, and national security interests you see there? Because I get a sense that you have some greater clarity there than you do when it comes to the moon.
Well, I would actually hope you're getting a sincere answer from me that we should be doing both and the other things. Now, Mars...
You think we can do both moon and the Mars on the current NASA budget?
I sure hope so. NASA was built to do the near impossible and have a thriving space economy in low Earth orbit and continue extraordinary science missions to kind of unlock the secrets of the universe, sir.
Well, I guess I just want to reinforce what the chairman said. I mean, I think we need to have much more clarity in how we're talking about what it is our objectives when it comes to the moon. As mentioned, we have a lot more clarity about what China's objectives are, and I hope that that is something that you can clarify quickly if you are confirmed.
Mr. Isaacman has the job. He is going to be confirmed to serve the White House and Trump. So maybe it is that they aren't interested in lobbying Congress. But the broader question here is how much room is there for cooperation between the White House and Congress in space policy? There are multiple ways to look at why senators asked the questions they did, and I'll probably spend more time going through the hearing over the next few weeks as time permits. But one of the reasons they could be asking is because Congress has a lot of say in what gets funded, and they want to know how much this administration is going to communicate and or work with them. We will have to wait and see what happens after confirmation when Isaacman appears before the House and Senate Appropriations Committees to advocate for the fiscal year 2026 budget. Those are future data points to see if this is going to be the relationship between this White House and this Congress. But there weren't strong signs of cooperation even here, and again, maybe cooperation on policy is not an expectation of either side. Senator Cruz even noted what he called Mr. Isaacman's reluctance to accept longer-term policy, in this case with a sustained presence on the moon.
I want to go back and revisit the exchange you had with Senator Kim, because one component of the law, you have said, and I'm glad to hear it, that under your leadership, America will beat China back to the moon. That's important. But the law is clear beyond simply going to the moon. That's part of it, that going to the moon shall be a stepping stone for further exploration of Mars. The ultimate objective is Mars, but going to the moon is critical. The law also specifies explicitly the administrator shall, and when legislation uses the word shall, it denotes a mandatory obligation. The administrator shall establish a program to develop a sustained human presence in cislunar space or on the moon. With respect to Senator Kim, you were reluctant to commit on a sustained human presence on the moon. Could you clarify your view on that to this committee?
Well, Senator, as a space enthusiast, I'd like nothing more, as I've said before, to see a number of lunar outposts and Mars outposts, and for us to even progress farther out into our solar system. If we are in an unlimited budgetary environment, we can maintain an ongoing presence on the lunar surface.
So again, it will be interesting to see if the White House and Congress can find areas where they can compromise, or will Congress do the same thing they did 15 years ago, and more recently during Trump's first term with Jim Bridenstine as NASA Administrator, which is to put more policy directives into the bills they pass. Previously, when they did that, it was a sign of less cooperation, less trust, and more independence, things like that. We may see a return of that relationship between Congress and the first Trump White House now if the sides can't reconcile their differences and or they won't try to reconcile them. We will see if there's any change in the tone or the vibe or both the next time Mr. Isaacman appears before Congress after he is confirmed as NASA Administrator. As noted a little bit above, the only big picture question that was clarified to some extent was where Congress stands on the Artemis programs. Although this is only one committee, it is the Oversight Committee for NASA. It is the one that will draft NASA authorizations that would be laws that Mr. Isaacman will have to follow after confirmation. The Democrats are the minority opposition party in this Congress, and they asked many of the direct questions. But Senator Cruz is the Republican chairman of the committee, who is expected to confirm Mr. Isaacman, and even he asked some direct questions, in particular about NASA programs that operate out of the Johnson Space Center in Houston, his home state.
So the statute is written in the disjunctive. It gives the choice of either the surface of the moon or cislunar orbit. What is your view on the Gateway project?
Senator, that's an area that if I'm confirmed, I would love to roll up my sleeves and get further understand what's working right, what are the opportunities the Gateway presents to us, and where are some of the challenges, because I think the Gateway is a component of many programs that are over budget and behind schedule, sir.
So you're describing Gateway as over budget and behind schedule. I will say there's a long history in NASA of administrations coming in and canceling programs and causing massive delays. Barack Obama did that with Constellation, and NASA struggled for years as a consequence. As administrator, are you going to cancel the Gateway program?
Senator, I have no intention as of now to say that I would cancel any program. I need to, if I'm confirmed, get in the job and understand where things are at. I want to assure you and this committee that I want to see America win and succeed and lead in space, whether that be the moon, Mars, low Earth orbit, and beyond. I do not want to see us come in second place, and I certainly don't want to see the right-hand side of that poster you put up, sir.
As NASA Administrator, he will appear before Congress and have to respond to questions about the budget. If the White House hasn't briefed him on the budget yet, then it's possible that the budget says something different. However, Mr. Isaacman will still be asked to explain why next time he appears. And maybe he wasn't briefed on the White House's budget, but he seems to have been briefed on the White House vibe. The guarded way he answered questions certainly suggests that. Another takeaway was that he accepted the assertion of senators that SLS is the fastest way to get astronauts to lunar orbit, where a lunar lander would take them to the surface and back, but he pushed back a little bit against the idea it was a better way long term. That would seem pretty close to in line with rumors of the White House position, but in evading answers to these and other questions, he also asserted that he wasn't familiar with the budget. There's a lot more to the hearing, and we will see how much time to devote to it over the next few weeks until the budget request. It may also make sense to come back to it when the budget request is released. But right now, here are some bottom lines from the hearing. So again, there was no clarity on the budget request from the administration in Mr. Isaacman's testimony, little in the way of confirming or denying of recent reporting about the budget, so there's still a strong possibility of major cuts in the fiscal 2026 budget request. Not only inside NASA's Exploration Directorate where the Artemis programs are, but also outside, such as the Science Mission Directorate. This was underscored on Friday, April 11th, by Eric Berger's story for Ars Technica, which reported that the White House gave budget documents to NASA officials that show that they want to cut the Science Directorate's budget in half. Previous rumors not only talked about cutting the science budget in half, but also the possibility of a full reset of Artemis. If the White House is willing to do this, and Isaacman wasn't briefed about it, then it certainly still seems possible that he wasn't briefed about what the budget says about Artemis II and III, and those would then therefore remain in jeopardy of being cut in the budget request. Right now, the White House isn't saying what they want to do on the record in public. Parts of their plans are being leaked. And it may be, as with other policy areas, that they will negotiate with Congress in private and do a deal without making a public case for their ideas. The budget that is signed into law will come from Congress, and we got a much stronger signal from them that things haven't changed, at least in this narrow area of government policy. We'll see if there are any changes to the position of members on the House and Senate Appropriations Committees later in the year, but there's less doubt now that key members support the programs and don't support canceling any of them. Regardless, there are no obvious showstoppers to confirming Mr. Isaacman as NASA Administrator. The Republicans control the presidency and Congress, and almost all of President Trump's nominees are being confirmed. So it's possible that Mr. Isaacman had the job when President-elect Trump nominated him. Based on his long, distinguished resume and his references, Trump and Musk, he certainly still had the job going into the hearing. So then the question is, why was he this guarded? He would probably be guarded about that if someone asked him on the record. His confirmation was not seemingly in jeopardy, but he also did not tell them what they wanted to hear. If we take SLS as an example, or as the proverbial poster child for this conversation, what they wanted to hear was a nominee not just say that they support SLS, but that they support the language in the authorization bill, quote-unquote, full development of SLS, unquote. In other words, they would much rather that he agree with them. They don't want to hear that SLS is too expensive and not sustainable. But on the record, he didn't volunteer a strong opinion or a clear opinion on that either. He certainly isn't going to go against his bosses in public, so this is somewhat revealing indirectly. But even if he had more diplomatically said he doesn't think SLS is sustainable, for example, he was still going to be confirmed, just based on Republican votes. And they probably knew that going into the hearing, given previous statements and private discussions. What they didn't know, which was pretty obvious based on questions in the hearing, was how little he was willing to say. It's more plausible that this is the way that the Trump White House prefers to communicate: guard it in public and then negotiate in private. And Mr. Isaacman is joining the Trump team. We'll be looking to see if there's any change in the tone or the vibe next time Mr. Isaacman testifies. That could be several months away, though. Given how carefully he chose his words and how guarded he was during the hearing, it will take still more time to parse Mr. Isaacman's testimony. Unless it is overtaken by subsequent events like the budget request, there's more to say about the hearing in the future. For Mr. Isaacman, this opportunity begins once he's sworn in after confirmation. But he's also a Trump man now and going forward. And like others who join the president's team, his legacy resets and restarts as a Trump man. Looking at news and notes for the week, this time last weekend, Artemis II astronaut Christina Koch published some imagery on her Instagram account, letting us know that the SLS Launch Vehicle Stage Adapter, or LVSA, had been lifted into place on top of the core stage in High Bay 3 of the Vehicle Assembly Building at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. That was posted on Sunday, April 6th, and then the next day, NASA KSC Public Affairs published additional imagery of the lift, which occurred on April 3rd. As of the end of this week, NASA KSC Public Affairs says that, quote, teams continue to work the integration of the adapter with the core stage, unquote. With lift of the LVSA at the beginning of the month, the last SLS element planned to be stacked for a while is the in-space second stage, the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, or ICPS. We are waiting to see when the ICPS is rolled from the multi-payload processing facility to the VAB, which will happen after servicing of its attitude control system hydrazine tanks in the MPPF. To help make some more room in the VAB transfer aisle for ICPS, NASA's Pegasus barge showed up at the KSC turn basin during the week to pick up core stage ground support equipment that is also needed back at the Michoud Assembly Facility factory in New Orleans. Now that the tooling is no longer needed for ground transportation of Artemis II, 3, and 4 core stage hardware that was delivered to KSC last year, it goes back to MAF onboard Pegasus, where more Artemis 3 and 4 hardware will eventually need those ground carriers for a trip to Florida. Happening in part during the Senate confirmation hearing on Wednesday, we saw a short parade of the equipment on NSF's Space Coast Live livestream as it was moved into the parking lot where the KSC press site is, which also provides access to the turn basin dock. Some of the equipment included the elements of the Multipurpose Transportation System, or MPTS. Those are the carriers that hold and secure the core stage horizontally so that self-propelled modular transporters, or SPMTs, can move it overland from buildings onto Pegasus and then off of Pegasus to another building. We saw the two hardware interface structures, or HISSs, which are mounted to multipurpose carriers, or MPCs. The forward HISS attaches to the solid rocket booster forward attach points on the core stage inner tank. A common HISS attaches to brackets on the engine section where the thrust structure is integrated. Those were used last July to help move Core Stage 2 from Michoud to KSC, and then held the stage until the end of last year in storage in the VAB transfer aisle. They were used again last month to help move the stage from Boeing's Core Stage Vertical Integration Center in VAB High Bay 2 to stacking in High Bay 3 with the Artemis II SLS SRBs. We also saw tooling that was used in the late summer last year to transport the Core Stage 3 boat tail and Core Stage 4 engine section from New Orleans to Florida. The boat tail was bolted to the bottom of the Core Stage 3 engine section in the Space Systems Processing Facility at KSC, and then the Core Stage 4 engine section was set up in Boeing's SSPF work area alongside the Core Stage 3 unit in the fall. Those tools now go back to MAF to also support future transportation. The MPTS tools will be used to transport the upper 4/5 of Core Stage 3 to KSC for final assembly. And the engine section transportation tools will be used in the future to transport the Core Stage 4 boat tail and Core Stage 5 engine section hardware. During the week, we also saw new imagery of flight hardware for the Gateway's Habitation and Logistics Outpost module, HALO for short. On Thursday, April 10th, the European Space Agency posted a still image of the Lunar Link, which is a lunar communication system that will be integrated with HALO for flight. The social media post says that assembly has been powered up for testing and that one of the next steps is installation of additional avionics equipment. The HALO module itself, or its partially outfitted structure anyway, was seen in pictures released by NASA on Friday, April 11th. After shipment from Thales Alenia Space in Turin, Italy, these show the HALO frame being removed from its transportation container back on April 3rd. The module is now at prime contractor Northrop Grumman's facilities in Gilbert, Arizona, in the Phoenix area, where it will be turned into a working spacecraft. It will be fully assembled, all of its wiring and equipment installed, and it will go through integrated functional testing and checkout. Eventually, it will be transported to Florida for connecting with the power and propulsion element, and then encapsulation for launch. On April 8th, Mobile Launcher 2 prime contractor Bechtel lifted the third of 7 umbilical tower modules into place at the East Park site in the KSC Launch Complex 39 area on the north side of the VAB. The Module 6 umbilical tower subassembly was partially outfitted offline in the KSC industrial area by Bechtel and then hauled out to the ML's construction site for stacking with the rest of the umbilical tower. At the East Park site, Bechtel is working on outfitting the launch platform base of the ML, in addition to interconnecting the now 3 stacked tower modules as much as possible at this stage of construction. After the umbilical tower is fully assembled, the umbilical arms will be lifted into place, along with other hardware to be added to the ML base, such as tail service masts and vehicle support posts. Internal plumbing for liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen propellant loading and unloading, and water systems for ignition overpressure protection and sound suppression, and also for safety systems like fire extinguishers, will also be installed. The last estimate of completion of Mobile Launcher 2 was around the end of the summer in 2027, which is about 2 years from now. After assembly and integration, Exploration Ground Systems will put the ML through a long series of verification and validation testing at Launch Pad 39B and in the Vehicle Assembly Building before an SLS vehicle and Orion spacecraft could be assembled on it, as is planned beginning with the Artemis IV mission. Thanks as always for watching. Click on the like button if you found this video informative, and consider subscribing to find out what's going on with Artemis every week. If you're willing to make a one-time donation to support what I do, I would really appreciate it. I put a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page in the description. Your donations will make it possible to make more field trips to NASA centers and contractor facilities here in the U.S. I also recently added memberships to my YouTube channel, and I want to thank all the people who have joined so far. I am planning on posting additional videos there and more frequent updates on what's happening during the week. I included a separate link to join in the description, but you can also click on the join button on this page above the description, and there's also a place to join on the channel homepage. Thanks for your support.